Before we get into talking about a new American Civil War, there is a campaign right now for withholding votes for Pelosi's speakership to force a Medicare for All vote. There is some major gaslighting about this, even from the likes of AOC. The House margin is thin, so this is how one uses power. We're told if we lose, we wouldn't get what we want. What? Is that some sort of double jeopardy like in the judicial where we can never vote on Medicare for all again? If we cannot get Medicare for all in the middle of a pandemic, then when? I want them on the record, and they will lose in 2022 if they vote no, and they know it. Playing nice is what the already powerful do. We will not wait, we will sacrifice, and we will remember. So, an impending civil war. Personally, I do not see a traditional hot war coming, similar to 1861. But I'm also reminded of Aaron Mate, Chris Hedges, Max Blumenthal, and all the other actual investigative journalists reporting from soon-to-be civil wars, revolutions, or coups that the elites and liberals never saw it coming until the tanks started rolling in. We should ask, when we talk about an impending American Civil War, who would fight? Whom would they fight? How would it go down? How would it resolve? And as we go along this topic, there are other equally dystopian scenarios: a cultural Cold War, a police state, secession, maybe a corporate feudalist state, or just a run of the mill failed state, or, God forbid, a general strike. In the 1860s, the Civil War was mainly, in my opinion, an agrarian slave labor economy versus an industrial free labor economy. Both were true existential threats to the other. And years before, the northern industrialists, like the lobbyists of today, forced tariffs that benefited their companies over European ones, which raised the cost of everything, especially in the South. There were definite culture wars, but this economic one was the key to the hot war. Is there something similar today? Both sides, however framed, exist in one economy, a banking one, not agrarian, not industrialist. The lockdown is the closest issue, but that is feeding the corporate monopolies, not a replacement economic system. I can also view this all from an increasing police state lens. In the cities, it's police violence and oversized budgets. In rural America, it's the ATF and the FBI. Even without fully realized corporate feudalism, just the decency above all else, neoliberals and their sycophants want a swift reaction to ever-increasing protests and violence, from basic reactions to poverty and corporate oppression to BLM, Antifa, and Christian fundamentalists, all of which were around before Trump and will continue after. For now, we are depending on police not enforcing things like deportations and evictions. We've been in the middle of a cultural Cold War. Partisanship, moral superiority, info bubbles, social media degeneration, all of this has been increasing. Sure, there will be more instances of small groups and individuals causing mayhem and violence, but we will continue to look to the state for now. For a hot war, we need to look at and keep an eye on the rise of militias. We need to ask, what would it take for a Chicagoan like me to march on Atlanta? What could they be doing in Georgia that would motivate me to do that? They could introduce slavery again. Of course, they won't. But what equally or similar terrible things might they do to their own people that would cause me to take up arms? Maybe if the elections were legitimately thought of as illegitimate as they were in 1860. But today, Trump loyalists, about 20 million people, a fraction of the vote, not all Republicans, I'm talking about Trump loyalists, are a fraction of the vote, and they are the only ones truly thinking it was illegitimate. But also, in my opinion, more than half the country thinks all elections are generally illegitimate. There's a good chance that the Republican Party, and this is crazy, will become the party of the people, if in rhetoric only. And if they figure out how to actually solve a problem, they'll be unstoppable. But as the neoliberals continue to say, not now, and don't worry, and it's your label and tone, not the economy, stupid, and the left populists are silenced by capital, the right-wing populists take the whole lane. There was some grifter on YouTube, and I know he was one because at the end he was hawking vitamins. So he says that the goal of the lockdown is to crush non-corporate businesses so that we all become dependent on handouts. So we will then allow the state to do anything, and that's socialism. Of course, he's a grifter and he doesn't have the definitions right, and it's a fear-based reaction. But if I didn't know any better, he would sound righteous. There is hints of truth in all of that. Another person, I don't know if they were a grifter or not because they weren't selling me vitamins, but they were commenting on how the book White Fragility is the same, though reversed, as Hitler's race theory, which, again, at a surface level view, and if I didn't know any better, might have a little resonance. So while we mock the fear and ignorance, and especially of the charlatans and the grifters who prey on that, our moral superiority does not erase the reality. We can't pretend it's not existing or wish it away. I see mostly that there are, in fact, people on the right who want a war. And there are people on the left who are deathly afraid of people on the right. So we should be asking, how can states be punitive towards each other? What actual thing can they do other than this cultural war? What would make us march on Atlanta? What would make them march on Portland or something? And while all that's happening, how can the elites use the idea of war to mess with us? And remember, with all this cultural and legislative gridlock, we are left with corporate imposed law. And let's ask finally again at the very beginning, who is fighting this and whom would they fight? And if not a hot civil war, then how does this play out in a corporate state? I think that if we talk about these things and exhaust some of these other explanations, we are left with what we want personally, and that our wants together are very similar. And then we can have solidarity on a class basis. We can have solidarity on a individual property versus corporate monopoly basis. We can have solidarity based on we want to fight for us, not the rich. So when we talk about a new American Civil War, we have to address the current situation. We have to address the current feelings and maybe not jump to such a simplistic, reductive version that a new hot civil war is coming, but how all the terrible things can increase and compound. And the sliver of light, the sliver of hope is as we all see more all of the things, we are hopefully starting to realize who the true enemy is. And that's the rich. That's us. I don't have a happy ending to this video. So I'll leave it there.